Self-discipline is not a personality trait. It's not something encoded in your DNA, handed to you at birth, or reserved for a select few who seem to effortlessly stay consistent. It's not a natural talent, and it's certainly not magic. Self-discipline is a skill, a decision, a learned behavior that you cultivate over time through conscious effort, through deliberate choices, through internal leadership. It's a muscle that gets stronger with practice, and a mindset that gets sharper through repeated alignment with your highest values. It's not about being born with willpower, it's about creating it. Self-discipline is the mental training, ground where you teach yourself to follow through, not just when it's easy or convenient, but especially when it's uncomfortable and inconvenient. It's the bridge between where you are and where you say you want to be. It's the link between ambition and achievement, between dreams and results. And without it, the most vivid vision, the most inspiring goals will remain suspended in imagination, never crossing the threshold into reality. You could have the most detailed blueprint in the world. You could have clarity, passion, even motivation. But if you cannot consistently follow through, especially when emotions shift, moods swing, and life gets loud, then progress will always be temporary. Without discipline, motivation fades into excuses. Intensity burns out, consistency collapses, and momentum stalls. Discipline is not about chasing perfection. It's about showing up every single day with integrity. It's about doing what you said you would do, long after the mood in which you said it has disappeared. It's the silent muscle that keeps moving forward when the world around you offers countless invitations to stop. Discipline shows up when your excuses do, when your body is tired, when your mind is noisy, when your feelings try to convince you to lower the bar. People often say they need motivation to act, but motivation is fleeting. It's like a gust of wind, strong for a moment and gone the next. Discipline is different. Discipline is the anchor that holds you steady in the storm. It's the structure that carries you forward long after motivation fades. It's the internal engine that drives your choices, your rituals, and your identity, without needing emotional permission to operate. The truth is, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Discipline creates those systems, habits that function without debate, without negotiation. They don't ask you if you're ready. They don't care if you feel like it. They execute because they're anchored to who you are, not how you feel. That's how real transformation begins. But discipline isn't built overnight. It's not the result of one inspired weekend or a burst of productivity. It's forged over time, through repetition, through practice, through hard conversations with yourself. You build it by choosing structure over chaos, by choosing alignment over comfort, by catching yourself when you're slipping, and pulling yourself back with honesty and grace. It begins in the smallest moments, not in public, but in private. Not in grand victories, but in silent wins. The moment you resist the urge to procrastinate. The moment you close the tab full of distractions. The moment you get up and do the thing you said you would, even when no one would have noticed if you skipped it. That is the seed of self-trust. And self-trust is the soil in which discipline grows. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your self-belief deepens. Every time you do what you said you would do, your identity catches up. And when your identity evolves, your actions follow with less friction. You no longer have to force discipline, it becomes who you are. But make no mistake, mastering discipline is a lifelong process. It's not a checkbox you tick, it's a standard you uphold. And that standard must be built into how you manage the most precious non-renewable resource you have, time. Time is the ultimate truth teller. It reveals what matters, not in words, but in attention. If you want to understand your priorities, look at your calendar. Look at where your hours go. Look at what gets scheduled and what gets postponed. People who master discipline don't treat time casually. They guard it, they shape it, they lead it. If you let your schedule be reactive, your life will be reactive. If your time is consumed by notifications, distractions, and low-value tasks, you will feel overwhelmed but underachieved. You will confuse busyness with effectiveness and activity with progress. The most disciplined people don't just set goals, they assign time to those goals. They don't just make to-do lists, they block out time on their calendars for focused, undisturbed execution. This shift from task-based thinking to time block execution is a game changer. It eliminates decision fatigue. It removes negotiation. When something has a designated time, it transforms from an idea into a commitment. Discipline requires boundaries. Boundaries with people. Boundaries with your own tendencies. You must learn to say no, not just to others, but to your own urges to delay, to scroll, to seek comfort over progress. Every no to distraction becomes a yes to depth. Every time you protect your time, you reclaim your life. And this requires more than time management. It requires time ownership. You stop blaming the clock. You stop blaming your mood. You stop blaming the chaos of the day. And you start leading. When your schedule reflects your values, your life begins to align. You create structure not to restrict yourself, but to free yourself from the chaos of indecision. Discipline is also about how you relate to resistance. Resistance is not a sign to stop. It's a signal that you're on the edge of growth. Resistance shows up when you stretch beyond the familiar, when you're about to break an old identity and step into a new one. That tension, that discomfort, that's where transformation lives. Your brain is wired to protect you, not grow you. It wants comfort, not expansion. That's why every time you pursue growth, your mind will resist. But the disciplined don't wait for resistance to disappear. They expect it. They learn to operate despite it. They take action while feeling fear, doubt, exhaustion, and uncertainty. The strongest form of discipline is separating your feelings from your follow-through. It's choosing to lead yourself, not by mood, but by mission. Even when you're tired, even when it's raining, even when you feel invisible or unmotivated, that's where character is carved. That's where grit is built. Discipline doesn't require you to be extreme. It requires you to be consistent, quiet, repeatable, focused, especially when nobody's watching, especially when the reward is delayed, especially when no one is clapping for you. Small, non-negotiable actions done daily will beat bursts of intensity done occasionally. 5 minutes of commitment beats 5 hours of procrastination. And over time, those small acts compound. They build resilience. They build proof. They build you. You don't build discipline by being perfect. You build it by being aligned. By taking your highest values and weaving them into your daily actions. By turning intention into instruction. By becoming the kind of person who honors their word, not just to others, but to themselves. Discipline isn't about waking up every day full of energy or motivation. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you're tired, uncertain, or uninspired. True discipline is forged not in the absence of resistance, but in the presence of resolve. It's the act of pushing forward when everything inside you says stop. That resolve doesn't just appear, it's built through repetition. By showing up again and again, you create a track record of action, that slowly chips away at resistance. The resistance never fully vanishes, but it loses its grip. It no longer makes your choices for you. It no longer defines your standards. Ironically, resistance is often at its strongest when you're on the verge of transformation. Just before you outgrow an old identity, just as you're becoming more consistent, more focused, your mind rebels. Why? Because progress feels unsafe. It threatens the familiarity your brain clings to. So when resistance rises, it's not always a sign that you're off track. It might mean you're exactly where you need to be. Discipline is not about making life easier. It's about becoming more aware. Aware of your patterns, your excuses, your emotional responses. Aware of when you're acting from vision and when you're reacting out of fear. That awareness gives you power. And with that power, you can choose better. You can act even when you don't feel like it. One of the most powerful ways to build discipline is by keeping your actions small, but non-negotiable. When pressure is high, your actions don't need to be impressive. They just need to happen. 10 minutes of writing, 5 minutes of journaling, a walk around the block. It's not about the task. It's about the identity it reinforces. You're someone who follows through, not because it's convenient, but because you've made that standard sacred. Discipline dies in negotiation. The moment you start asking, do I really need to today? You've already lost ground. So remove the debate. Act first. Feel later. Train the muscle of movement. The more you train it, the stronger it becomes, until eventually, resistance becomes less of a red flag and more of a green light. You train this by intentionally doing hard things, not to suffer, but to grow. Controlled challenges, daily friction, that's how you lead your own evolution. Because if you only grow when life forces you to, you're always playing defense. But when you seek challenge before it seeks you, you become unstoppable. This doesn't mean life must be a constant grind, but every day should stretch you, even just a little. A moment of discomfort, a test of consistency, a reminder that you're in control, not your comfort, not your mood, not your fatigue. You. That reinforcement, that decision to lead yourself through discomfort. That's how you master resistance. Discipline requires emotional independence. It's not about waiting for motivation. Motivation is a spark, but it's unstable. It fades. It fluctuates. If your behavior depends on motivation, your consistency will always be fragile. Discipline is different. It's not built on emotion. It's rooted in identity and execution. It's not about waiting until you feel ready. It's about doing what you said you'd do. Discipline lives in the gap between intention and behavior. It doesn't ask, how do I feel? It asks, what did I commit to? That's how progress happens, not through inspiration, but through reliability, through systems, through habits, through removing emotion from the equation and replacing it with structure. You build routines. You set time blocks. You create accountability. And most importantly, you adopt an internal culture where follow-through is the expectation, not the exception. People who don't master this cycle end up stuck in waves, moments of intense motivation followed by long periods of nothing. They keep restarting. They look for new plans, new hacks, new energy. But the problem isn't the plan, it's the discipline to stick with it. The real shift begins when you stop asking, how do I stay motivated? And start asking, how do I stay consistent? When you stop chasing the feeling and start building the system, your foundation must be stronger than emotion. It must be rooted in who you are, The version of you who shows up no matter what. The version of you who stays steady even when the spark is gone. You reinforce this identity with action, small wins, repetition, doing what you said you would do, especially when it's invisible or inconvenient. That's where belief comes from, not from hype, but from proof. You prove to yourself that you can be trusted. And that trust? It grows when your environment supports your discipline. You eliminate distractions. You reduce decisions. You make the right path easier to walk and the wrong path harder to access. That's how you build a system that moves forward even when your motivation disappears. Discipline becomes your default, not your decision. Because the truth is, most people don't fail because they're lazy. They fail because they think it should feel easier. They mistake discomfort for danger. They think if they don't feel like doing it, they must be doing it wrong. But real growth, real strength, it lives on the other side of resistance. It comes from confronting discomfort, not avoiding it. When you treat discomfort as a signal to keep going, not to stop, you rise above the patterns that hold most people back. That's why exposure to discomfort is key. Cold showers, long runs, silent focus, saying no, saying yes, doing the hard thing, not to punish yourself, but to prove to yourself that you are in control. These challenges aren't torture, they're training. They remind you that you don't need to feel perfect to act with power. This is leadership, not of others, but of yourself. And leaders don't rely on ideal conditions. They create results, no matter the weather. That's what separates those who dream from those who execute. Discipline isn't glamorous. It's not always exciting, but it's the bridge between the person you are and the person you're becoming. And every time you show up, especially when it's hard, you lay another brick on that bridge. So don't run from resistance. Walk into it. Not because it's easy, but because you've chosen to become someone who moves anyway. You say, yes, this is hard, and yet you do it anyway. That's not weakness, that's power. That's self-discipline in its purest form. It's when you override the temptation to retreat and anchor into your breath. When quitting whispers, in your ear, you respond with, one more. One more rep, one more step, one more moment of alignment. And when distraction tugs at your focus, you don't drift. You remember what's at stake and move forward. Not perfectly, but consistently. Always forward. This is how the gap between who you are and who you're becoming begins to close. Because the only thing standing between those two versions of you is your ability to hold the line. To hold the line when it's not easy. To hold the line when no one's watching. To hold the line when comfort offers you the easy way out. And you decline the offer. You choose your standard instead. The highest level of discipline is not performed in front of an audience. It's practiced in silence. It's not flashy. It's not for show. It's private. It's what you do when no one else is watching, when there's no applause, no praise, no feedback. Because true discipline isn't fueled by attention. It's fueled by internal agreement. It's a quiet contract with yourself that says, I do this not for recognition, but because I said I would. That's real self-leadership. That's the unshakable foundation you build when you no longer need pressure from the outside to stay consistent. You see your own effort. You keep your own score. You hold your own line. When you start living from that place, everything shifts. You become less reactive and more intentional. You stop proving and start becoming. Not louder, but sharper. Not busier, but more aligned. Discipline built on self-respect doesn't crumble under pressure. It hardens into resolve. Because every time you follow through on a private promise, You build trust in yourself. And every time you break that promise, that trust erodes, not in others, but in you. Doubt doesn't grow from failure. It grows from inconsistency with your own word. But belief? That's built from behavior. And every time you show up without fanfare, without motivation, without feeling like it, that belief gets stronger. You stop relying on hype and start living in rhythm. You build self-accountability rituals. You ask the questions that actually matter. Did I follow through today? Did I stay aligned with my standard? Did I move with purpose, even when no one would know if I didn't? And when the answer is yes, you sleep differently. You walk differently. Because you're no longer borrowing confidence from moments of inspiration. You're generating it from consistency. That kind of discipline, it doesn't wear off. It compounds. And you're not here for hype. You're here for change. That's why you've studied the structure, the identity, the mindset. You know what breaks discipline. You know what builds it. And now the only thing left is to live it. Discipline isn't about how you feel. It's about who you've chosen to be. It's not a morning mood. It's a lifelong method. You've learned that resistance isn't the enemy. It's the invitation. It's not a stop sign. It's a signal that you're in motion. You don't wait to feel ready. You move before doubt gets a voice. You shrink the distance between knowing and doing. Because that's what leaders do. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need a crowd. You've trained yourself to finish what you start, regardless of applause. And the beauty of all this, it's not just what you achieve, it's who you become. Not someone who gets lucky, but someone who stays ready. You now live in alignment. You lead from identity. You finish the day not chasing perfection, but honoring your process. That's not performance. That's not temporary. That's discipline. And when you live like this long enough, your life starts to reflect it. Not just in your results, but in your reflection.